Well, welcome everybody. I'm so excited to be here with Jill Thomas. She is the Director of Podcast Services with Her Dat Media. Jill, thanks for joining me today.
Of course. I'm excited. I really am. I'm excited about this.
Yeah. Well,
This is my first time being on your show.
I know. So you were featured in Metro Magazine's, our issue that's just coming out about celebrating women. And, you know, I've known you for many years. We've gotten to know each other more over the last couple years. I'm excited that the podcast Contribution Rocks finally has launched. And so this is going to be on the podcast, and it's also going to be on metroTV. So people are going to be able to watch it and hear it. But part of the Celebrating Women piece in Metro Magazine was just looking at women who are doing great things in their careers and also just in their lives, and getting to know a little bit about how it all started. And I love your story. I love the front end of your story. So let's just talk a little bit about you, like history, like where were you born? Just give us a little background.
Sure. Actually born not that far. Actually, I was born in Omaha, but from Ashland, raised in Ashland, graduated from high school there, went to Doane College, wanted to be a veterinarian, and had a scholarship in their equine program. And unfortunately, the program shuttered after the first year I was there. I'd been there for a few years, and unfortunately, it didn't continue. And so the next closest that I could go, I was kind of scattered what I was going to do. Unbelievably, that spring, I was invited to a wedding anniversary for a great aunt and uncle that I did not know. I'd never met them. And so my grandmother wanted to go to this because it was her sister-in-law, and it was their 50th wedding anniversary, and they lived in Arizona. And so that was my first trip to Arizona. I went with Grandma. It blew my mind. And I'm like, I'm going to ASU. I don't know why, but I'm going to ASU. I didn't know what I was going to do, but that's where I ended up. And went into communications, which is kind of foreshadowing just a little bit, I guess. But then I also grew up around horses. I had shown, I had rodeoed. My dad was a horse trainer, and also they had a horse transportation company. And so there were thoroughbreds, quarter horses around, and I missed my horses. So I eventually brought my horse, my one, found a place to board him, and got back into the action a little bit. And then met some people that were part of the Phoenix JCs. And then I see a flyer for the Rodeo Queen competition for the Phoenix JC's Rodeo of Rodeos. And I'm like, there we go. That feels homey. So I'm like, let's give that a whirl, and did that. And then when I was coming out on the other end of the rodeo thing, part of what I did was a lot of interviews on radio stations and TV stations promoting as an ambassador of the Phoenix Rodeo. And so I kind of, I guess, cut my teeth, so to speak, on doing interviews. That I learned trial by fire. And the last interview I did was at a station in Phoenix. And after we got done, he said, "So what are you going to do now?" And I was like, I'm thinking maybe going to promotions. Probably, I'm hoping maybe I can get something with one of the major sponsors for the PRCA for the rodeo, et cetera. And he says, "Boy, if you ever think you might just want to look into radio." And I was like, "You get paid for that?" And I didn't. It just seems like way too much fun to get paid, and
like to do something that you love to do. Yeah.
Right. And so eventually I let that kind of muddle, I just kind of ruminating on it. And so I decided that's what I was going to do. And I ended up getting an internship at a station in Phoenix. And that was how I ended up in radio, actually. Yeah. And so the rest of the story, eventually I did move back to Nebraska.
Right. Well, I'm gonna stop you just for a second, because I want to just go back briefly to the rodeo thing before you got into rodeo. Because I was reading about this, and I love Rodeo Queen for the Phoenix JCs. What was like what's one of your favorite memories about that? Because I'm not a rodeo person, or I'm not in that. I don't go to rodeos. I think I've been to a couple, but I'm just curious. Like, what inspired you, or what love did you have when you were in that environment?
Yeah, it's a real community. And it's a really inclusive community. It's really fun, especially Arizona was completely different for me. Their rodeo circuit down there is called the PRCA rodeo circuit, was the turquoise circuit. And it was basically Arizona and New Mexico. And I believe at the time there were 12 rodeos on the circuit in Arizona, New Mexico. One of the best memories overall was the traveling, because it was everybody rolled in. It was weekend to weekend to weekend. And so you would, when the season was hot, and down there it was hot all the time because you,
Sure. Yeah.
you could go all year round. But it was just traveling from one location to the next, and not taking my horse all the time. Sometimes I rode other people's horses, but primarily taking part in any of the community events that the local rodeo community was putting together. So you were kind of like volunteering, but also being an ambassador for the event itself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
It was fun.
Yeah, and it's always just fun for me to get to know something that I just don't know about people, and that's something that I didn't know about you. So I don't know. I just love that. All right, so fast forward. So you came back to Nebraska, and a little bit of history about that. Kind of
Yeah.
what did you get into, and then starting your company, Parkville
Mhm.
Media, and then now at Hurdat. So just kind of take us a little step by step, and I might just interject there with a question or two. So
Please do. Please do. Yeah, when I came back, worked at a couple of radio stations, and then had an opportunity for an ownership, partial ownership of a couple of radio stations in central Nebraska. And it was in Hastings, KHAS and KICS at the time, and very community involved, very, very entrenched in the community. That was just a great experience. Coming from working in Phoenix was like so fun, because I learned so much from so many on such a big platform. And then going to Hastings, where it was really this was grassroots. This was where it is a part of the community, the communication system. It was counted on by the residents, and it was something you really felt that connection, and that was fantastic. We were out there for a number of years, and then eventually ended up working through a friend of mine, Neil Nelkin, who I had worked with at one of the stations before Hastings. Neil had an opportunity at what was then Sweet 98. And they didn't have a morning show for a number of months. And he said, would you be interested in looking in? Because I'd been wanting to get back closer to mom and dad, right? Family, they're in Ashland. And so they brought me in, and they also brought in this guy who grew up in Waterloo, and he was working in Tulsa at a morning show, and that was Pat Safford. And we didn't know each other. And they said, we're going to have you guys try out and see if you guys have any chemistry. We might get lucky. Who knows? Might work.
Did you guys have chemistry?
Not at all. Hated each other. Couldn't stand it was unbelievable. It was like we'd always known each other. It was just weird, and got along great. Both had similar backgrounds. He had worked for a number of years for Rocket in the morning. That was kind of like his internship. So that was his, out of the gate thing. So he had a great set of experiences behind him. And so we then were the morning show for Sweet for a number of years. And then when that was over, just about a handful of years ago, Pat and I, we toyed with the idea about going somewhere else. There were opportunities out there for us, but the idea of starting over, when we had such equity in our name here, and we know this place and our families are here, that's when we decided, well, we need to figure out what we're going to do. Are we going to try and do something together? Or are we going to part ways and see what happens? And we decided doing the podcast thing, because we've been watching this, for probably 5, 6, 7 years before we left radio. You could see it coming. It was bubbling. And we saw a couple of times, we thought something was going to happen, and they unfortunately took a different direction. And I was like, oh my God, I thought they were going to do it. I thought they were going to have it. And we saw these opportunities kind of sliding by. So we decided to give it a shot and see what we could put together. And lo and behold, we hit at the right time.
Absolutely.
There was nobody else doing that here in town. And
because what year was that when you guys started Parkville Media?
2019, January 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really not that long ago.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. We officially launched in January 2019. So it
Okay.
was, and then it was just a matter of putting the word out there. We knew there wasn't another production house that did podcasting from practically, I think, Chicago, and then the West
Wow.
Coast. It was like Portland. I think Nashville had one. Kansas City didn't at the time. And radio stations weren't really equipped for that because they're doing production for their commercials. So
Sure.
to block out an hour for a podcast is not good business for
Sure.
what they're doing. And
Yeah.
so it didn't make sense. And I think that for most of the production houses, they weren't set up that way or geared that way. And that's why it worked for us, because we knew we were going to have to, it's going to be bigger blocks of time, and editing and everything, and kind of consulting a little bit, helping people understand, because we knew we could help them do it because they're already experts in what they're talking about. That's the whole beauty of the business podcast.
Sure.
It's just teaching them those small technical skills. And once you get past that,
Yeah.
sky's the limit. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I met you and Pat, it was in 2019. Probably not too long. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't too long after you
Mm-mm.
launched the company, and at that time, both my parents had passed away, and there was just all this stuff going on. But having lots of conversations with you and really kind of seeing what the podcast was all about, it was amazing how you guys really mastered creating something very special that, like you said, you were the only game in town, and
Yeah.
doing it so, elegantly.
Thank you.
And yeah, so I was just so impressed, which now, it's just so great to have you now on the show.
Well, you were one of the first people that we did talk to. I mean, there's those people that are connectors. You're one of those people. Van Deeb is another person
Yep.
that's a connector. And honestly, Van was our very first client.
Yeah.
And he's still rolling. He's still doing
Yeah.
such a great job. And our whole job, the way we see it as far as the podcast, we don't have anything to do with the day-to-day. We're just like a vehicle to get you where you're going. And we just want to stay out of the way. So once we can get you up on the tracks and you're rolling, we just like hands off and away you go. And he's just been doing phenomenal. And then there have been others that have followed. I think after we got him started, and we'd met you about the same time. It was probably about 4 months in. By the time now, we have almost 60 podcasts on our network.
I know. It's pretty amazing. And they're all so diverse. I was looking at the website where you have the different podcasts listed, or a lot of them. And it's just, they're all unique in these little areas. Okay, so we let's fast forward, because I'm just looking. My God, we've been talking for over 13 minutes.
Stop.
But that's okay. We've got a couple more minutes.
Okay.
So let's just transition from Parkville Media and how you merged or acquisition with Hurrdat Media.
It's a beautiful story. It honestly is one of our clients, Core Bank. I got to give credit, Melissa, Glenn, and those guys are just, Mark was there and Melissa, and they had invited Bill Hipsher along with Chris Gorman, who are the guys 1 and 2 with Hurrdat, and asked them to come on. They were talking with entrepreneurs, and it was early March 2020.
Okay.
It was right before everything closed down.
Yeah. Yep.
And so he came in studio to be on the podcast. Their agency, which does a lot of live events, and they have Hell Varsity, and they do web design, and they do content services, they wanted to add podcasting. They'd been trying, but building from the ground up, it's like, where do you start? And so it was just kismet. And they came in, and there we were. And then they reached out and asked, would we be offended if they asked about an acquisition? And we both just like, huh? We said, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And then how do we do this? And so we finished it up then by July of that. Yeah, immediately. It's just like turned it around really quick. And we're still in the same facility. Obviously, things are starting to get back where people are getting back into their regular offices. And we do expect to move probably in September. I think
Yep.
we'll be in the headquarters.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was just kismet. It was synchronicities. There were people that work at Hurrdat that we have worked with before, and I didn't even know they were at Hurrdat. And it was just all these little things that came together.
I mean, that's amazing. And I mean, congratulations. And I love the, just, yeah, like you said, March 2020, before it just everything just kind of blew up, so to speak. And
just to point out real quick, I was going to say, because he came in studio, I think that made a big difference, because we were still doing podcasts all during 2020, but most of them were remote, like what we're doing right now.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that made a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited to see the new space when it opens up and the grand opening. And so,
yes.
Well, this is a great place to break. We'll definitely have you back on the show. I really appreciate you sharing your story in Metro Magazine.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And thank you. I appreciate being included.
Yeah, you're welcome, Jill. And I know we will be talking soon. So Jill Thomas, Program Director of Podcast Services, Hurrdat Media. Thank you again, my friend.
Thank you.
And folks, we'll be right back. I am here with Jill Orton. She is the Nebraska, Iowa Red Cross Regional Executive. Jill, it's so great to see you again.
Andy, it's my pleasure to be here with you today.
So we've had many conversations over the last few years. I think most of the time we're talking about some kind of disaster that has happened, whether it's flooding, the pandemic, other things happening in our community. But today we're going to talk a little bit about you and how you come to be the regional executive. And the Red Cross has really impacted your life from a young age. So, and I just, before we start, our issue Celebrating Women that is out, we profiled you and I learned a lot and I really appreciated that. So let's go back and let's start from the beginning.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity to share, Andy. So I've had a couple real defining Red Cross moments that I didn't even realize were part of my life until here I am in this great career. And these are just instrumental to look back on and go, no, this is really meant to be. One being my grandmother was a Red Crosser from the very beginning. She actually volunteered to set up Red Cross dances where she met my grandfather in Loop City, Nebraska and Elyria, Nebraska, in that area. So pretty cool family history. She was a 20-gallon blood donor.
Wow.
And yeah, pretty darn amazing to know she gave consistently many times a year. You can give every 56 days. And so obviously she did that. And we celebrated her life right before the pandemic hit. And my mother gave me her Red Cross blood donor cards, and I was looking at them. And to the day on my birthday, 10 years prior to me being born, was her first blood donation. And lo and behold, we had the same blood type. So that's pretty interesting, I do think.
Is that unusual?
I'll just share, I'm an O positive blood donor, which is the most common type of blood. So the odds are probably
Yeah.
it could happen.
Yeah.
So that's my first Red Cross kind of connection that I didn't even put together until just recently. And another one was my mom took me to Red Cross swimming lessons when I was really young. And I went through that whole entire array of courses, including lifeguard training, which serves me well now to this day. It helped me get my first nonprofit job at the YMCA and coaching. And it connects me to even the amazing things happening in Omaha right now, the Olympic swim trials and volunteering and knowing that whole entire group of folks. So that's Red Cross. And then when I was in 8th grade, my town of St. Paul, Nebraska was hit by a tornado, and lo and behold, the Red Cross came and set up shop right in front of my house.
Wow.
So who knew that all these touch points along the way would equate to a pretty darn amazing career that I have had and continue to have at the Red Cross.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, what inspired this career choice?
A little bit of luck, I do think, and it's taking opportunities as they show themselves along the way, not being scared to try new things. I always thought I'd be a teacher. My kids laugh at me because I said I thought I was going to be an elementary school teacher, and they roll their eyes at me, really, Mom? So my parents are both teachers, so I knew I'd do something in the service industry. And one thing that led to the next, I have a degree in pre-med, chemistry and biology, and I moved to Hastings, Nebraska, followed my husband. I got my MRS degree and went, what am I going to do for a career? And so volunteering, and near and dear to my heart and service, led to this career.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about, you mentioned several times in the article about getting out of your comfort zone. And how you did that. So let's talk a little bit about that, because you went on to what was your first position at the Red Cross? Because you kind of moved up the ladder, so to speak, to where you are today.
So true. I started out through my aquatics experience being a safety specialist at the American Red Cross through what we now call training services. And so that was my first step. And I just really had some, I suppose I always had strong leadership capabilities, but it's just, I aspired to always learn new things, and being a learner, I was quite ambitious. And with that just came, even if I felt I wasn't ready, I was willing to take that risk.
Yeah. And then you talked about, you were in kind of the position that you are now, but was it in Southwest Iowa, or where you really had to develop a team from like the ground up?
Oh, yeah. So in 2014, I was called to lead a brand new team, and it was like a realignment and a merger of two teams that came together. And it was really an eye-opening learning experience. A lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, literally. And I learned a lot about myself as a leader, but also it's not about me. It's about building a team of leaders that can lead the way. And then how do we empower our volunteers to take leadership positions, which I was afforded. And so with that, I'm forever grateful and will live that model of living by example.
And then from there, did you transition up into the Omaha area?
No, I was in the Omaha area. I've never had to move, go figure.
Okay.
So it's just always been one of the what's the next best thing along the way. And the organization provides amazing career development opportunities. I was a part of what was called the LEAD program, Leadership Education and Development Program. And that just really gave me access to executive leaders nationally and opened the door to learn new things and to take on new projects and new teams.
And let's talk a little bit about kind of the future. I want to go up to the future and looking at not just future aspirations, but where do you see yourself, your career with the Red Cross? I mean, talk a little bit about the future.
Well, I really feel like I'm a tried and true Red Crosser, but I'm also a really strong leader. I always want where I can continue to learn and grow personally. And where can I coach and mentor others to make a difference and an impact?
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking to do. Ultimately, so my children are young adults in college. When I don't have to work to help support, I'd love to transition someday, and maybe 15, maybe 20 years, where I can be a full-time volunteer again.
Yeah. And let's just touch briefly on some of the highlights over the years.
So Red Cross gave me the opportunity to partner within the Rotary structure. So in 2009, I was part of a life-changing experience where myself, along with 4 other non-Rotarians in a youth exchange, went with a Rotarian to Taiwan for a month to share goodwill and our experience as Americans. I'm still amazing friends with those people. My best friend is the leader of that program at that time, and we still have fun times together. And I learned a lot about myself. I learned I could travel internationally. I learned that I could speak in front of people. I learned that, you know what, I have what it takes, and let's take the next step. And it opened a lot of doors for me.
Yeah, what a great experience. Wow. I can't even imagine, but I mean, a month in a country that's so different than
Exactly.
ours, and really, yeah.
The inclusion standpoint, to look at it differently and to share from as a human, we all desire very similar things. We want to be heard. We want to make a difference. We want to have fun. And it was really good. And it made me look at things differently and come back and put those lessons into play as I build teams.
Well, kind of our final question, I just want to ask you, and this sometimes it's hard to kind of look at yourself, but how do you inspire others? How do you see yourself inspiring others?
I think it's kind of a 3-pronged approach for me. I want it to be fun, like I mentioned. I think I really learned how to listen, got to know what people really want. And then how do you lead by example to know you're a part of it with them, so that my experiences can then help amplify their experiences, so that we're all in it together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jill, again, it was great to learn more about you. I love the backstory of how you came, just that Red Cross piece early on, where there were no dots to connect at that time.
No.
And just what you're doing now. I mean, truly, you're an inspiration as a woman leader, and the Red Cross does so much for so many, I mean, all over the world, but, our community, just really proud to have you in the Red Cross and everything you do in the community. So I just want to thank you for that.
Well, Andy, thank you for the opportunity and for me to share not only about myself humbly, but about an organization that makes such a difference in our community.
Yeah. Well, you sharing the story about the organization and yourself, I know inspires others. It certainly has inspired me. So I just want to thank you, Jill, again for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Andy. And I look forward to, I'm sure we'll talk again.
I know we will.